There's a book called Gesher HaChaim, The Bridge of Life, by the late Rabbi Tukochinsky. We using today, as well as many other sessions, his monumental writing. Our discussion, continuation of yesterday, it's the Hilchot Avelut, the law of mourners, in particular zooming in when it's come to regel for the intermediate day of festival. So we are 17 lines from top of the page 20. תנו רבנן, קיים כפיית המיטה 3 ימים קודם הרגל, אינו צריך לכפותה אחר הרגל דברי רבי אליעזר. 2 points. First, this halacha, it's not so much applicable, but it's important to be aware of. Second, is the avenue here is absolutely by the path of the ritva. So what's the halacha? In those days they used to act as a mourner by turn around the bed. So they used to take the bed, it's ancient type of bed, and you see it in many halachot in those days. For example, in Tisha B'Av, etc., they act as mourner in that manner. So they said, if a person did it, Rabbi Eliezer hold, 3 days prior to the festival, so he's not, he doesn't need to do it later. Why? Because we explained yesterday, the regel, the festival, and now abrogated the Shiva. So since he already observed 3 days prior to a festival, Rabbi Eliezer, as a single opinion, hold that that's sufficient. Ritva add to that, and he said any act of mourning prior to a festival, it is not just the overturning the bed, it's any notion of mourning. If it's occurred prior to a festival, so it's already, the person already act as a mourner, and there the festival is already a null continuation.
What's the purpose of overturning the bed? Is that so that you don't sleep on the bed, or you sleep on it in a different way, or
sleeping in a fashion that it causes you discomfort?
Okay.
It's in a sense, it's like the midrash about Sodom and Gomorrah. They said that they used to give people bed that is a small side in the body, or etc., so they or tortured bed, some type of bed that it's opposite in all those companies that sell you fancy mattresses.
Is this have to do with mourning? You should always do that when you're mourning.
In those days they did it.
Is there a practical way of doing it nowadays? Is there anything that we do nowadays that's sort of similar? Like, should we take the mattress off the bed, or should we do something different?
There are those who basically hold on Tisha B'Av to do something in that fashion that cause you discomfort. We don't rule that for public, but there are those who hold that.
Like take the mattress off and sleep on the box spring or something like that.
Something like that. We don't rule that for public. Anyway.
But that then they would just Tisha B'Av, or would those people also hold to do that during Shiva as well?
We don't do that nowadays.
Okay. All right.
So they said.
Thank you.
The Ritva said that if someone is basically passed very close to the festival's time, very close. Imagine a situation, it's Ben Hashmashot, it's already about to twilight, and the mourners did absolutely nothing. They didn't say, they didn't take off the shoes, they didn't do, it's really nothing. It's just act of losing loved one, and that's it. So Ritva said, you have to go by the entire Shiva after the festival. That's the first chidush of the Ritva. The second one, he said, even a person did kfiyat hamita, overturning the bed, it's sufficient. But again, Ritva is one opinion, there are others Rishonim that disputed him. So far we follow one avenue, which is Da'at Yachid, one single opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. V'chachamim omrim, and listen carefully because we follow halacha by the sages, who said, afilu yom echad, ve'afilu shah echad. So the idea is, the sages said, even for 1 hour. You remember we discussed yesterday the Gordon's case, and a few other cases we have over my 13 years in this community. We have several cases of people that will complete the burial, mamish, very close to the festival. So when that happened, then following that teaching, so the Shach said in Yoreh De'ah Shin Tzadik Tet 399 that afilu sha'achat, even it's 1 hour of morning before the festival, already the festival mevatel, annul the Dinej Shiva, the whole idea of sitting Shiva. So the rabbi said here that there is some private act of mourning, but as far as the formal Shiva observance, 1 hour or some period of time, it's sufficient. Amar Rabbi Lazar beRabbi Shimon, hen divrei Beit Shammai, hen divrei Beit Hillel. If you need 3 days or 1 day, שבית שמאי אומרים 3 ימים. Beit Hillel hold that the festival does not annul the idea of 7 days period, and you have to have at least 3 days prior to the festival in order to have an effect of a festival by annulling this Shiva period. Versus Beit Hillel אומרים אפילו יום אחד, even 1 day, even 1 hour, it's over. So we have to bear in our minds what we study. If you remember that Rabbi Eliezer was Shamuti, Rabbi Eliezer was under ostracism, if you remember, and he from the school of Beit Shammai, and we followed Beit Hillel. הרב הודה אמר רבי חייא בר אבא אמר רבי יוחנן אמר להו רבי יוחנן לרבי חייא בר אבא לרב הונא אפילו יום אחד אפילו שעה אחת. And that's the way we do in our days. So Tosfot asked here a question. Rabbi Yochanan said that halacha kestam Mishnah, which is 3 days. So Tosfot said, Kashli da'it le Rabbi Yochanan halacha kestam Mishnah. He left it like that. Anyway, Rava amar halacha ketan adidan, the amar shlosha, that need 3 days. Ravina, here is a story. Ravina ikla le Sura Difrat. That's the name of a city close to that Euphorian river. Amar le Rav Chaviva le Ravina hilchet hamai. What's the final halacha? Amar le afilu yom echad afilu sha'a achat. So, meaning the regel, the festival doche avelut, override the morning, even 1 single hour, and that's the way you see it in the Rambam, in the Code, in the Rosh, in the Reef, all different poskim, the whole, even 1 hour. Yativ Rabbi Chia bar Abba v'Rabbi Yami v'Rabbi Yitzchak nafka akil'ah. Akil'ah is like the entrance to the house. There is a run in Tractate Nedarim, page 23, and you see it in Rashi, that's the special entrance they used to have in those days. The Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, nafal kmilta b'menayu. You hear the conversation. Minayin la'avelut shiva. It's the obvious question that I was just waiting for you to ask me. How do you know that there is a 7 days period? The chtiv, that's a rabbinic derivative from juxtaposition in the text. They said in the book of Amos, chapter 8, V'afachti chageichem lehevel. It's act of a rebuke, admonition from Hashem. He said that I will turn around, God forbid, those festival days to days of mourning. So here we juxtapose mourning to a festival, meaning Machag, the same way as festivals of Pesach and Sukkot. Shiva, we observe them for 7 days. Of Avelut, Shiva, the same way as the mourning period is 7 days. Tosfot asked you a question. How about if you look at Chag Sukkot, it's actually 8. And he said, no, Shmini Atzeret is regel bifnei atzmo, is independent festival. So now the Gemara asks, Ve'eima Atzeret dechad Yoma. How about the one of the 3 festivals is the festival of Shavuot, And we, meaning the people in Israel, they're observing 1 day. Here you have in diaspora 2 days. So usually the Gemara in Sukkah, page 5, said that you have 2 meaning of the pasuk. You go by the one of the Shmuot. So the Ritva here asks, if you apply at the festivals, so how do you know that you derive from the 7, meaning Pesach and Sukkot? So they said, "Ahu mibayele lichdei Reish Lakish." Amar Reish Lakish mishum Rabbi Yehuda Nesia, minayin לשמועה רחוקה שאינם נוהגת על היום אחד. דכתיב, הפכתי חגיכם לאבל, ואשכרה נצר ויקרא חג יום החג. Beautiful. We have 2 categories in Shmu'ah, meaning you hear. God forbid, it will never happen, but that's the reality. We have now soldiers, right, in Israel, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and the loved ones, sometimes for all kind of reasons, can hear it later. So is a category in Halakha that is called Shmu'ah Krova. You hear it not immediately when it happens, you hear it later, but in a proximity of time, versus Shmu'ah Rechoka if it's exceeded of passing much later after the passing day, as soon as you see the details. So they said, if it's a Shmu'ah Rechoka, if you heard about it, and it's already happened, let's say, months and a half ago, that's called distance news, Shmu'ah Rechoka. So therefore he said, we derive in a way from the same line. I will turn a mas'ed from those act of festivals to act of mourning. And we said that one of the festival is what? The festival of Shavuot. And festival of Shavuot, how long we observe? 1 day in Israel. So therefore, that's the idea of Shmu'ah Rechoka. And therefore, what we derive from that? That by meaning of the word Chageichem, you festival in plural, it's not just one. So it means you go by the large one, Pesach and Sukkot, and by small one. Meaning the large one apply that Shmu'ah Krova, meaning you heard about it day before yesterday. Yesterday events took place. So then you go by 7 days period because you juxtapose to what? To Pesach and Sukkot. And the small one, meaning Shavuot, applies to what? To Shmu'ah Rechoka. Shmu'ah Rechoka you observe only 1 day. So the mourning period, you should know, always start when you hear that. And we know that it's rabbinic, derivative from the Torah, but it's derivative. And it's called, Ritva call it asmachta. You derive it indirectly from the Torah. So here we hold miktzat hayom kekulo. If you observe some of the day, we take it at the framework of the total day. And therefore, even 1 hour. Tanu Rabbanan, Shmu'ah Krova, noheget 37. Shmu'ah Krova again, if it's a short distance from the event, yesterday, day before yesterday, etc., etc. So you apply for what? 7 days period and 30 days period. Shmu'ah Rechoka, if it's a distance, bad news, אינה נוהגת אלא יום אחד. Now details. איזו היא קרובה ואיזו רחוקה. Now let's understand what's involved here. קרובה, if it's something that it's proximate, it's close, בתוך 30, if it occurred during the 30 days period after the passing. רחוקה, לאחר 30, if it's a distance, meaning if it's past 30 days period, which is כרבי עקיבא, we follow here דברי רבי עקיבא. So, if you think about Rabbi Akiva in a practical way, imagine we have several cases like that. A fellow is old, he hardly hear, he has a brother live the other side of the country in the west, right? And he is in a heart condition, strokes and all kind of terrible conditions, elderly person, have a brother. So the question is, do you tell him, when you tell him, how you tell him, he hardly move, he hardly can do anything. It's a serious question, halakha. So there's school of thought that you tell him after the 30 days. School of thought. Why? Because when you tell him that, what he can do, it's already past the Shmu'ah Rechoka. It's far away. He cannot do anything. He is sitting in a wheelchair, hardly move. So you do something, act of mourning, you do a little kiriya, or you do something for him for an hour. That's one school of thought. You do like the minimum. וחכמים אומרים, the sages disputed Rabbi Akiva, and they are the majority, but we don't follow them, so you see how. אחת שמועה רחוקה, ואחת שמועה קרובה, ואחת שמועה רחוקה, נוהגת 37. They said no. Makes no difference if it's a distance, bad news, or close bad news. We follow 7 and 30 days. Now we go by the practical halacha within the text of the Gemara. אמר רבא בר חנא אמר רבי יוחנן, כל מקום שאתה מוצא יחיד מקל ורבים מחמירים הלכה כרבים. Usually, in a usual manner in the Shas, when you see one single opinion is lenient and everyone else are stringent, you go by the stringent. That's the usual manner in halacha. Even you see Tosfot said that it's not always, but it's in a usual way. Usually you go by the majority. Yachid verabim, halacha kerabim, right? Chutz mizo, but there are the exception, which is the halachot involved with mourners. שאף על פי שרבי עקיבא מקל וחכמים מחמירים, even Rabbi Akiva is lenient, and the sages are stringent. הלכה כרבי עקיבא. ואמר שמואל, הדחה כדברי המקיל באבל. Shmuel hold, when it's come to act of mourning, we go by the lenient. When it's come to act of avelut, of mourning period. So even there are some Rishonim that say that avelut is biblical, but here they said, even Tosfot said, even it's come to a Torah. It's a famous Tosfot in Tractate Moed 46, that even it's come to the Torah, when it's a conjunction to law of mourners, we go lenient. The Ramban tried to prove it. Anyway, Rav Chanina Atya lei Shmu'a de'avua mibet Chozai. He heard a distant news of a passing of his father in a place called Beit Chozai. Ata lekamed Rav Chizda. So he went before Rav Chizda and asked, what's the halacha? Amar lei Shmu'a rechoka eno noegit elo yom echad. Since it's a distance news, it's only one day. Rav Natan bar Ami Ata lei Shmu'a de'imei mibei Chozai. Ata lekamei de Rava. Amar lei הרי אמרו שמועה רחוקה נוהגת על יום אחד בלבד. As we said, one day. היטיבי, במה דברים אמורים? בחמישה מתי מצווה. When that apply, remember we said so many times, when it's come to a act of mourning, it's applied by Torah law to 7 immediate family. Here we differentiate between parents and others. That's applied to all the other 5. אבל על אביו ועל אמו, for one who lose his dad or his mom, 37 needs to observe 7 days and 30 days, even שמועה רחוקה. So here you see a different point. Since he I heard about mom passing, I have to mourn for how long? For 7 and 30, even it's a distance one. אמר לי יחידאי ולא סביר על הנקבתי. This is one view and we don't follow it. So what we see, let's put together the pieces. We see here 3 views, and it's important for us to know them and understand how we go by halacha. First view, which is the practical halacha, is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva hold that when it's come to shmu'a rechoka, a distance, a news of losing someone of the 7 immediate family, even for a parent, is not apply more than 1 day. That's Rabbi Akiva. Second view, the sages said, when it's come to those distance bad news, you have to observe 7 and 30, like your regular act of mourning. And then here we see a Tana that differentiate between father, mother versus the other, brother, sister, son, daughter, and the spouse. That applies only 1 day. But again, as we said, that halacha follow Rabbi Akiva.
When is in a delayed report about a parent's passing? When does counting the 11 months start? From the time of the death or the time that you start the Shiva period?
Always is a famous of Moshe Feinstein.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in the Gesher HaChaim by Rabbi Tukuchinsky. It's a dispute how you count the first year versus the rest of the years.
Right.
There is a view that said that you have to go for the first year from the time of burial. There is another view that said that you have to go by the passing. In general, if you buried within the framework of the proper burial, which should be as soon as possible, so therefore you count from the time of passing. Yet, as I said earlier, the Gesher HaChaim brought, and you see it also in a few halachot by Rabbi Feinstein, that there are a school of thought that say that if you buried, for example, God forbid, but it happens, someone have a child in Panama, okay, and he passed, and the child, the son, traveled, and it took him 4 days to come
right.
to, and you freeze the body in between,
mm-hmm.
you're waiting for the son. So there is a school of thought, since you start the act of mourning, his or them, in the time being, the son, you act in a sense of accepting condolences and being a mourner only upon completion the burial. So since it wasn't immediate, since it was a period of time in that circumstance beyond control, in other words, it's a sin not to delay burial, mm-hmm. but it was beyond control for all kind of circumstance. Mm-hmm. It can happen also if it's the police involved or others and they want to investigate certain things and they delay it. It's all kind of reasons why sometimes things happen. So there is a school of thought that said if it's passing that framework, first year you go by the burial time. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
But I guess I'm asking in the case of a delayed report, so it's never ever, you always start the 11 months counting from either the time of burial or the time of death, never later, not when you receive the news.
Not when you find out.
I'm saying, because if you didn't find out until, say, 2 months later.
2 months later, we just said it's 1 day.
Well, no, but I'm talking about how you count the 11 months in that case. It's still counted from when they passed. Or
okay, so I'll say it's a long discussion halacha. It's not so simple. Okay. And there is a basic. It's not only Gesher HaChaim, but it's several books. The one I like the best is Rav Ovadia Yosef. Mm-hmm. The late Rav Yosef wrote one of his books, involve a lot of details. And if you want later, I'll go with you all the specification. Anyway, so the Tanya. So where we are, okay, yes, Tanya. Maseh umet aviv shel Rabbi Tzadok begin Zak. That's the place the Gemara in Smachot said in Madai, Persia, somehow. So anyway, the father of Rabbi Tzadok passed. Vodiu lachar shalosh shanim. He lived in Israel. So 3 years later, he heard about his father passed. Uba v'shal et Elisha ben Avuya. So he came and he asked Elisha ben Avuya, and the Avetz said, that's not the famous Elisha ben Avuya, it's someone else. Mm-hmm. Anyway, uzkenim sheimo, ve'amru nahog shiva u'shloshim. So here you see Elisha ben Avuya is stringent to do a 7 and 30, unlike the way that we rule. But anyway, Tosfot HaRosh said, and also Rabbi Dr. they all said that's that Yachid. Practical halacha is not that way. וכשמת בנו של רבי אחיה בגולה, ישב עליו 37. So when the son happened, even he heard 30 days prior, he did 7 and 30. So that's huge chidush. Why it's huge change here? Because this is not parents, and you hold the same as Chachamim, the same as the sages. So the Gemara said, Ini, is that the way Rabbi Chia ruled? Veha Rav Barachua de Rabbi Chia, the Hu Bar Achte de Rabbi Chia, Ki Salik Lehatam Amar Le, Abba Kayam. So here is a few different girsaot between Rashi and Tosfot. One school of thought, it was the father of Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Acha from Kafri. He is a stepson, meaning he have a son from previous marriage. So, and that was name is Aivu. That's the Rashi's. The same Rashi said that the mother of Rabbi Chia was a mother from the previous marriage. It's Rashi in Tractate Psachim, page 4. So Aivu married the daughter, that it wasn't any form of relative, and the son's name is Rav. So it means that Rav was son of the brother of Rabbi Chia, only from the father's side, and he was son of his sister, meaning nephew, from his mother's side. That's the way Rashi tells us. So Rabbi Chia asked him, Abba Kayam? He said, is your father Avihu is still alive? 20b, I'm now using one of my book, explanation of Rashi. Rashi said here, אמר לי אמא קיימת בלשון שאלה הוא. כלומר, עד שאתה שואל על אבי, שאל על אמי שאף היא אחותך. So Rashi said here, and we explain it also in Tractate Psachim, page 4, Rashi said here, he wants to imply indirectly, he doesn't want to tell him directly he lost, he just said it in a language that he understands indirectly by himself. So some of the poskim derive from that the person doesn't have the obligation to tell someone else that he lost someone, because otherwise, if it was not direct relative, he is not. The whole language here is an implication. Tosfot have two girsaot here, but basically it's the way you refer it to say you're alluding to something. And Shulchan Aruch Yoredea in Taf Bet elaborates on that. I'm just saying it as a side note. You see here, Amar le Ima Kayemet, Amar le Ima Kayemet, Amar le Abba Kayam, meaning it's implying directly. I always instructed our presidents when someone passed, so when you give announcement before the end of service on Shabbat, or when you write it on an email or whatever it is, don't put it at the front, first announcement, so and so, etc. You can, while we're talking, you mention that. So it's a way to say things. I reflect back to 25 years ago when we lost a lot of young men during the first Lebanon war. So it was a well-training people that train, and I'm sure Gilbert also familiar with that, that they train how to say the family the bad news. You need to be a very professional and very erudite to say it and not to cause more damage, mental damage, to family members when you inform them of the passing. Anyway, אמר לי לשמעי, חלוץ לי מן עליי, והולך אחר כלי לבית המרחץ. So, meaning, here it's a few girsaot, what exactly happened. Since during the Shiva, the mourner is prohibited for all these things, right? So he meant to say that this is Shmu'a Rechuka, this is a distance bad news, and therefore I have to observe only one day. That's the way we learn. Shma Minat Lat, listen carefully, we learn three important items from this. One, Shma Mina Avel Asu B'Nilat Asandal. This is well known, but it's important to know because we mentioned already in page 15b, is the idea that the mourner is not allowed to wear leather shoes. My late father-in-law, which tomorrow it's his yortzeit, he was very makpid, he was very strict that the kids, Kenai Hori have 11 kids, not to walk in the house without shoes. Either they have some flip-flops or things like that, or shoes, but not to go barefoot, because it basically holds that that's in Judaism act of mourning. Anyway, so that's number one. The mourner not wear a shoe. Yes.
For what period of time you go without using a leather shoes?
So that's the same as Tisha B'Av. If it's a mourner for Shmu'a Krova, it's a 7 days period.
Okay.
If it's a Shmu'a Rechoka and you observe it short time, so that's during that time. Number 2, Shma Mina Shmu'a Rechoka and Anoeget Ele Yom Echad. If it's a distance bad news, it's only 1 day period. Ushma Mina Miktzat Hayom Kechulo. It's also a third thing, that even part of the day, even we bury, right, just hour or two before Yontev, before the festival, you buried, it's enough. It's considering 1 day. So it means the question returned, since Rabbi Chia hold that a distance bad news hold for only short time, how come he observes 7 and 30 days for his son? It's not parents, right? It's the other way around. So they said, Rabbi Chia lechud and Rabbi Achia lechud. It's two different people. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi, שמע שמועה קרובה ברגל, ולמוצאי הרגל נעשית רחוקה. Which is, the festival makes a difference in the way you count the 30 days. עולה לו ואינו נוהג אלא יום אחד. You see how far we go with leniency. תני רבי עדה דמין קיסרי, קמי דרבי יוחנן, שמע שמועה קרובה בשבת ומוצאי שבת נעשית רחוקה, אינו נוהג אלא יום אחד. He heard bad news during Shabbat. Shouldn't happen, but he heard it. So you have to observe if it's a distance, meaning if it's Sunday already past the 30 days period, so you have to observe only 1 day. It's a famous story about the Chechnya Rebbe. He wrote an unbelievable book, several books. One is called Chovat Talmidim. Was an unbelievable teacher. He get killed during the Shoah. So the story goes, when it was a Shabbos, it was the Shabbos and Simchas Torah, and people in a hiding place was waiting for the Rebbe to come, and the old people gathered together in that hidden basement, and the hidden Torah is ready and everyone's ready, and it started having rumors. The first one was they see 10-20 minutes the Rebbe is not coming. They said yes, he lost his wife yesterday, it was a news about it, he must probably mourn over her. So another group said no, he's not familiar with that, he doesn't know about it. Another group said he heard but he's not observing it because it's Shabbos. Then there is another news said no, they took his children to the gas chamber. Therefore, to make long story short, while they're arguing if he's going to come or not going to come, the doors open, he came in and he danced with them. It was a very freilich Simchas Torah, and they danced with the Torah, and it's like nothing happened. The man lost his family, nothing happened. When they finished Havdalah, Motzei Shabbos, the moment that happened, he tore his garment and he was crying like crazy. That's only a great man like him, like the Piasetzner Rebbe, was able to do. Anyway, here they said if it turns more than 30 days period from the passing, even that day was Shabbat, so you have to observe only 1 day. So the Gemara asks, wait a second, since you tell me it's a distance news, Korea or no Korea, we said that is a rabbinic obligation to do what? To tear garments. So therefore, is that only asmachta or not? It's important to know that Rabbi Dr, the former dean of Yeshiva University, Rabbi Lem, he wrote excellent book on this, and he have a big to do with these halachot when it's come to the Korea. Anyway, we, meaning the observant Jews, we do it for real, meaning you not just do the little symbol, you do it the way it should be done. Anyway, Rabbi Mani Amar no Korea, Rabbi Chanina Amar Korea. You see a dispute when it's come to distance. One said that you should turn, one said not. Amar le Rabbi Mani le Rabbi Chanina Abish Lama le Didi de Amina. No Korea. It's good in my view that he said he's not tearing his garment. Hainu de loika velut shiva. You see that it's not a 7 days period of mourning. Ela ledidach, but according to your view, the amart Korea, kriya belo shiva mi ika. So here Rashi said, היינו דלקה אבלות שיבה, כלומר משום דלקה שיבה אינו קורע. So the big issue here, I elaborate in my book, but the big issue here is how you treated a person with tearing garments, while tearing garment is the first stage. You hear the bad news, you tear the garments, right? And the next thing, you go for the whole process, right, of Shiva. But you're going to tell me that if you don't see Shiva, you do still tearing garment. The truth is, it is such an halacha. It said in your Edea, in Shin Mem 340, he said that if someone like a great sage of generation passed, or for example the Nasi, someone was a number one honorable person in generation, so they tear the garments. Another important halacha, they said, God forbid, if you are in a place that someone who's Adam Kasher, a pious fellow Jew, and you are the present of his or her passing, you have to tear your garments. So that's the idea that you turn the garment not as an act of mourner, but it's an act of sorrow. So here, the Ritva said that the big question is that connected? Meaning the act of Kriya, tearing garments, and the observance of Shiva, it's part of that. According to what we understand, there is a school of thought that it's connected, and they are said, nah, that's basically, I think, the foundation of Rashi that disturbed with that. Anyway, ולא, ועתני איסי אבוה דרבי זרע, ואמרי לה אחוה דרבי זרע, קמי דרבי זרע, מי שאין לו חלוק לקרוע, if someone borrow his garment from his fellow, and Tosfot said, so what do you do now? You don't have your own garments, and you need to do the Kriya. So what do? It's not yours. So he said, ונזדמן לו בתוך שיבה קורע. So again, a fellow, Reuven, he borrowed his garment from Shimon. Okay? He's wearing it. Now he heard the bad news. So he cannot tear the garments that he's borrowed. So he cannot use it. Yet, doing the Shiva, which usually you don't change garment, but under this circumstance you change, and then you have your own, and when you have your own, now you can tear that garment, because it's yours. Okay? Even, it's not at the early stage, it happens during the Shiva period. לאחר שיבה אינו קורע, meaning if that happened, that you have your own garments only after the 7 days period, you don't have to tear your garment. רבי זרע בת רייב, במה דברים אמורים? רבי זרע follow him and he said, you know what we're talking about here? בחמישה מתי מצווה, אבל רבי ואמו קורע והולק. Here we try to differentiate between what? Between parents versus the other 5. 5 metei mitzvah, which is what? Brother, sister, son, daughter, and spouse. So we understand in the Torah that it's a mitzvah to occupy yourself and you mourn over them. But the other 2, which is father or mother, he needs to do that act of Kriya, act of tearing garments, even it passed the Shiva. So it means forever. That's the way Rashi and Ramban and Ritva understand. The Rambam, the Maimonides in Hilchot Avilu, chapter 8, he said that the only chiyuv, the only obligation to do Kriya for parent applies up to the 30 days period. The Ramban and the Ritva said no, it's applied up to 12 months. So you see that we're not yet in practical halacha, but it's different school of thought. When it's come to parent, we're treated in a different manners. Someone asked me on Friday, I don't know if I forwarded to you the email, but someone asked me on Friday about Dinei Kdima. What do you do when there are several mourners who take precedence when it's come to your side? Someone lost, God forbid, father or mother, versus someone lost brother or sister, and they have the same day of your side. Who is taking over the omen? So I look at Gesher HaChaim. Gesher Chaim Chelek Aleph, chapter 30, have a discussion over that. He didn't finalize it. And you see the Sefer called Torat Kohanim, he tried to say that the parents, it's more important. But the best way I advise that colleague, I can mention his name, he's a rabbi now in Israel, Rabbi Rappaport. I advised him to split, like we do sometimes. You have one person does up to, for example, Yishtabach, another person does up to Ashrei, another person does from Ashrei to the end. We try to split it in a way so everyone feels connected. But I said to him something that he thanked me later. I said, people misconstrue the concept of saying Kaddish. The whole idea is to uplift the soul, to make it peace. The best way is when it's come to fight between people, especially disgraced one, with the shul and people sometimes not religious and they're watching these type of things. Better for that neshama, for that soul, to let go and let someone else lead, and not to involve with any form of fighting over the omen, right? Anyway, so they said here, Kitanya hi lichvod aviv imo. So it's not because of the name of kriya, of tearing garments, but it's only in honor of a person's parents. So in a practical halacha we follow Rabbi Mani, which means if someone lost any one of his relatives, if he didn't tear his garment doing the Shiva, it's past, he's not doing that. But if it's a parents, because it's kavod in Shin Mem, the code said, that's also the Rabbi Akiva Iger said and others, the Gra, so you do it because of honor of parents. Anyway, Tanu Rabbanan. Kol ha'amur b'parashat Kohanim, whatever the Torah said in Leviticus chapter 21, in regards to rendering impurity by the Kohen, shekohen mitameh lahem, avel mitabel alehem. We juxtapose between those that the Kohen occupied with the dead. It's also applied to mourner. Ve'eluhen, and these are the least. Ishto, which is his person's wife, a spouse. Aviv vehimo, father-in-law. Achiv, brother from his father. Va'achoto, and if you have a virgin sister. Bno uvito, son and daughter. Hosifu alehem, the sages adds more immediate family relatives, that the Kohen become impure, which is Achiv, a brother from his mom, Va'achoto abtula me'imo, if you have a half-sister, it's a virgin from his mother, Va'achoto an-nesua, if you have a sister that's already married, Ben be'aviv, Ben be'imo, regardless to the father or mother, it's a married sister. So that's rabbinic.
Why do they differentiate between unmarried and married sisters if you're going to mourn for both of them anyway?
Tosfot asked that, and then Mukhe Yosef also asked that. That's the idea is that you have a different level of gradation.
Right.
You have a different gradation. In a simple way, if you go biblically speaking, you go strictly by full blood relatives.
Right.
Now, rabbinic speaking, that is derivative from the Torah, you go now for the second degree of blood relatives. In our days, I must tell you, it's break my heart, but that's the way it is. I sometimes involved with, inviting to officiate wedding, etc., etc. And sometimes you get invitations, and you really total puzzled by the parents and grandparents, because you see a set of names. In invitations, sometimes is the third marriage, and the children from, part of the children from the first and the second and the third, and from the father and from the mother, and you sit sometimes for hours with the family when it's come to the procession, who is first, who is second, who is, for sure it's nothing in the Torah and in the rabbinic, but you see the sensitivity when it's come to this, right? Anyway, the same way that you mourn over some people that in the first degree, כך מתאבל על שניים, דברי רבי עקיבא, which means that Shniyim meaning father of his father, that's Rashi said, son of his son, son of his sister, nephew, so that's called Shniyim. But the Radvaz in Ilchot Evel, chapter 2, said even those relatives from those, like son of his brother from his mother, it's considered part of Shniyim. Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar omer eno mitabel al ben bno val avi aviv. The only one you mourn, it's over a grandson, God forbid, or father. But Tosfot said that it's also applied to a father of the mother or the daughter of his daughter. והחכמים אומרים, כל שמתאבל עליו מתאבל עמו. So here again, I'm using my book, Rashi said here twice כלומר. He said, כלומר מתאבל עם אביו, כשהוא מתאבל על אב שלו, נמצא זה מתאבל על אבי אביו, וכן כל שמתאבל עליו, כגון שמתאבל על בנו, מתאבל עמו, כלומר מתאבל עם בנו, שהוא מתאבל על בן שלו, ונמצא זה מתאבל על בן בנו. So the question is how far you go with karov mit'abel alav, that relatives act mourn. So Rashi said here, any relatives, that if that one, a person will act as a mourner, you have to do it. So it means, number one is a act that relate to mourning of the father, and one act of mourning relate to the son. And I think the reason that he used twice klomar, because you want to emphasize in both directions. In both directions, so if the son mourn or something, or according to Tosfot, the daughter mourn of someone, so that's the second degree that he mourn over there. That's the idea. Kol shemit'abel imo, kol shemit'abel alav, mit'abel imo. Some Mefarshim said that any relative over whom one should mourn, if that person died, one mourns with him when he is in mourning. But the Gemara asks, Chachamim ainu tanakama, so the Chachamim is the same as Rabbi Akiva. It's not, ikabenayu imo babai. So it means if it's the same location. כי אחד אמר לרב לחיה ברי, וכן אמר לרבה ברי, באפה נהוג אבלותה, בלא אפה לא תנהוג אבלותה. So it means if the wife mourn, which unfortunately happened to me, right? Tomorrow it's his yortzeit. My late father-in-law was the chief rabbi of Shomron, died very young, 51 years old. So here the Gemara said, when she is around, meaning your wife is around, you act as a mourn with her. There's an act of friendship or courtesy. But you don't have that law of mourning when she is not around. Because according to the sages, as we said, you don't hold shniyim, the second degree, only if it's in the same location, if that location, the house that the mourn is staying. But Rashi said in Chumash Bereshit, page 20, chapter 20, pasuk Yud Bet, he said that Bnei Banim Areim Kebanim, the grandsons considering as the sons. So the same applied to the father of the mother and the daughter of the daughter, Tosfot said. Anyway, Mar Ukva Shchiv le Bar Chamua. Mar Ukva, the brother of his wife, passed. Savar lemeita balei shiva u'shloshim. He thought that he needs to do shiva and shloshim for his brother-in-law. Al Ravuna legabei ashkachit amar le tzudanita bai lemeichal. So he said, why you act as a mourner when you don't have to? לא אמרו לכבוד אשתו אלא חמי וחמותו. The only act that the sages ask a person to honor is what? Is the in-laws. The father-in-law, the mother-in-law, but not brother-in-law. The Tanya. מי שמת חמי וחמותו, hears, ואילו נשמת. הרב יצחק מאיר בן הרב ישראל. So if someone lost his father-in-law or his mother-in-law, אינו רשאי לחוף את אשתו, להיות כוחלת ולהיות פוקסת. Usually, the husband can ask the wife, I want you to have all these cosmetic, to look beautiful, etc. But here is the area that the rabbi said a person cannot do that while she is in the lost, when she lose one of the parents, either father or mother. אלא כופה מיטתו ונוהג עם האבלות. In those days, we said earlier, he needs to turn over his bed and act as a mourner. וכן היא שמת חמיה או חמותה. You see how sensitive when it's come to in-laws, right? If she know that his parents, father or mother passed, אינה רשאה להיות כוחלת ולהיות פוקסת. She should not do all these cosmetic things, whatever it is, red, blue, all kind of niceness around the face, אלא כופה מיטתה ונוהגת אבלות. The same manners that the husband mourn, she should join him. And again, remember, that applies solely for parents in either one of the spouse. ותניא אידך, אף על פי שאמרו, even the sages said that the husband אינו רשאי לחוף את אשתו להיות כוחלת ולהיות פוקסת, the truth is, באמת אמרו, but they said, the truth is, מוזגת לו את הכוס, it's proper for her in those days, they cannot drink wine like that, so they need to combine it, diluted it with water. So she can do that for him in order to make it convenience for him to drink. ומצאת לו מיטה ומרחצת לו פניו ידיו ורגליו. She will do all kind of things. So they said, קשיא נעדדי, you contradicted yourself, אלא שלב שמע מינה. כאן בחמי בחמותו, כאן בשאר קרובים. No, שמע מינה. Again, you have to differentiate between his in-laws versus others. תניא למאכל לא אמרו לכבוד אשתו, אלא חמי וחמותו בלבד. A person needs to honor his in-laws in honor of his in-laws only for the parents, but not for others, not for brother-in-law, sister-in-law, etc. שולחן ערוך יורה דעה 399. הקובר מיתו לפני הרגל. When one buries a close relative before a festival and begin observing mourning practices, even בצנעה, even in private, and even for a short period of time, the reminder of his 7 days of mourning are nullified by the festival. Said אפילו שעה אחת, even 1 hour. In such a case, the days of the festival also count to the 30-day period of mourning. However, if one did not observe any mourning practices beforehand, whether intentionally or accidentally, the festival does not nullify the mourning. That's what the Ritva said. Therefore, one must observe the mourning customs in private during the festival. And comforts come to visit and consult him in his home. Then you observe the 7 days period, the Shiva, of mourning after the festival. During those days, his work is performed by others, since he is refrained from work during the festival and was consoled. However, the festival counts to the 30 days mourning period. Because he observed the custom of the 30-day period during the intermediate days of the festival. Now, another important halacha is shmu'a krova, a recent, u'shmu'a rechoka, a distance news. That's the Yoredea 402. If one receives news that his relative has passed away within 30 days of the death, then he acts as if the day he heard this news were the day of the burial, even if this news arrives on the 30th day. Therefore, the mourner rends his clothes and observes the 7 day and 30 days period of mourning. If one heard about the death after the 30 days, so that's shmu'a rechoka, then he is required to observe mourning only for 1 hour, whether he heard this news during the day or at night, because the principle that the legal status of a part of the day is like the whole day, miktzat hayom kechulo. for one's father or mother, mourning practices are observed even after the 30 days. And that's the Yerushalmi too. And one may not cut his hair until others rebuke him for looking this hair. If one receives news about his father or mother's death more than 12 months after it occurred, then he practices only 1 day of mourning. I know that sometimes people ask me that question about sick people, that they cannot take the bad news, and how should you inform them? Sometimes you use this halakha to, in one hand, to have them some act of mourning, yet it should not affect them in such a manner. Anyway, it's one of those questions that the person should ask a prominent posek before making decision. Yoredea 402, what happens if it's Shabbat or festival? If one hears on Shabbat or festival that the close relative has passed away, and by the end of that day, the news will become a distance tiding, then the news of passing is already considered to be a distance tiding when it's received, and consequently, the mourner observes mourning practices in private on Shabbat or festival itself. On the following day, you observe only a single day of public mourning, which is, as we said, only Sha'ah Achat. We talk also about Kri'ah. So he said, when you're rending garments, that's the code, Yoredea 402, one is not required to rend his clothes upon hearing distance tiding for other relatives. However, one is always required to rend his clothes upon hearing about the death of a parent or a great person with whom he discussed halakha. That's the shach. This ruling is basically followed the Rabbi Man and Rabbi Zera. Al mi mitablim, over whom does one mourn? 374 in the code, in Yoredea. One is required to mourn over all relatives from whom a Kohen become ritually impure, including one father, mother, son, daughter, parent, brother, unmarried parent, sister, and wife. The sages added, as the Tosfot said, right, that one should also mourn over his maternal brother and his sister, whether she is married or unmarried, or whether they share the same father or mother. Just as a man mourns for his wife, so a woman is required to mourn for her husband. One is required to mourn with any family member over whom he would mourn if they were to die. This applies when they are in his presence. However, outside of their presence, if it's a different location, one is not required to observe mourning practices. That's basically the sage's view. Although a man is required to mourn for his wife, he mourns with her only over the death of her father or mother. Similarly, she is required to mourn with him only when one of his parents died, but not when he loses another close family member. The Rema writes that nowadays the custom is to be lenient with regard to this type of mourning, and one does not observe mourning practices for second-degree relatives. That's the Tur and the Rambam and the Rosh. This has become the common practice, and one who is stringent with regard to this issue is considered to be acting as a peculiar manner. It is generally accepted that one practices certain customs of mourning during the first week after the death of a relative who is one of those for whom one is required to mourn formally. This includes all those family relationships which prohibit giving joint testimony. In such circumstances, one does not bathe or change clothes, and in some places other customs of mourning are observed as well. This applies specifically to recent tiding. One who wishes may act stringently and mourn formally for a person for whom he is not required to mourn or wear black clothes for him. So, as we said, can be for the great Chacham, for Nasi Shemet, etc. That's the Yoredea 374. And as we said, that's go both ways. When a close relative of a married woman dies, she is not permitted to wear a makeup, and her husband cannot force her to do so. However, she may make his bed and pour his cup of wine that he used to do in those days. A married woman is permitted to wear makeup after the 7 days mourning period, so that she will not appear ugly in her husband. But again, that's the code in 381 said that it's all act of proper manners. As far as halachic obligation, it's only when they are located in the same place. So for example, in our case, when my wife went to a house of her mother with all the brothers, so when you go there, then you act accordingly. But when she is not around and you're in a different location, you don't have this type of, and as we said several times, when it's act of mourning, the rabbis follow Rabbi Akiva, which means that we usually are very lenient when it's come to this.
לשולוים מלאכי השולוים מלאכי